Hey, what's up? What's going on, everybody? I'm Nate Schoemer, and you are watching my show on dog training. Today, we are doing a live Q&A. So if you have some questions and you would like me to answer them, go ahead and drop them into the chat. I am using a new program, so this is a learning curve for me. So just give me a moment. Please bear with me. Looks like we have 2 people watching right now. Looks like we have 2 people. Okay, excellent. All right. So, does anybody have any questions to start off? Is there anything that you've been dealing with, anything you've been struggling with, any sort of clarification that you want on anything? Go ahead and jump on and ask the questions. And I think we are completely live, not just for channel members. Okay, we have 17 watching. So who has a question so far? Does anybody have a question? Anything that you're struggling with? Anybody trying to train a service dog? Anybody working with any behavioral issues? And by the way, when I'm looking off to the side like this, I'm looking at the live feed on YouTube so I can see the questions coming in, and then I can look back and answer it at the camera. All right. Hi, Nate. What was the training institute you used for your training? So what exactly do you mean by that question? What training institute? Are you asking where I went to school to learn how to be a dog trainer? Or are you asking me more about what type of method that I use? Can you be a little bit more specific with that question? And also, I want to take a moment each time and write down when the questions are coming through. How do you train a service dog for fainting spells? Is that something I can do alone? So I want to, okay, so yes, so I'm assuming, so I'm going to answer the first question, which was, what was the training institute you used for your training? So I went to school at the Tom Rose School, and it's still an active school. There's lots of different schools that people can go to learn to be a professional dog trainer, but that was just the foundation. I am constantly educating myself. Recently, I went to a seminar with Larry Crone, and we did a podcast episode, which I should be posting this week. I did the professional and master program at the Tom Rose School, graduated top of my class. Then I went back and I was an instructor at the school, worked directly with Tom, worked directly with Dave Van Garderen, who is now the head instructor at Kennelwood Academy, who is, in my opinion, one of the best dog trainers in the country. And he has proof of that as well, because he won the national championship for Schutzen, or IGP, and he competed at the world level. Now, he didn't win at the world level, but he did pretty good. And something just happened with my setup. Okay, hold on. Give me a moment, please. Okay. Sorry about that. Looks like we're back. And so I lost my train of thought. Yeah, and I've also done lots of different courses online. I'm still working on Nino's course that he has, which is the MVP program. I'm also a member of the Michael Ellis School, and that's something I highly recommend. So if you're asking because you're curious as to my background, so you know if what I'm telling you is worth listening to, or if you're interested in becoming a dog trainer yourself, it depends on the budget and the time. But for anybody who's interested in being a dog trainer, and if you want to do it in a way that's very, very cost effective, I cannot praise Michael Ellis enough. I think when it comes to teaching dog training, he is truly the GOAT. Nobody explains it or understands it, I believe, at a level that he does. And he has an online membership that you can join if you go to Michael Ellis. I believe it's michaelellis.com. It's $70 a month. It's basically a steal. And so I'm on that, and a lot of times when I have downtime, I just listen to him because I think he's so good at articulating and breaking down the complexity of this sport we call dog training. So if you want to become a dog trainer, signing up for his $70 a month. Again, it's a steal, and there's a lot of great information on it. So if I was to start out and I didn't have very much of a budget, I would find someone local. I would probably go on Nextdoor and I would make a post and I would say, hey, I'm trying to become a dog trainer. Is there anybody in the area who is also trying to become a dog trainer or someone who is new within the world of dog training? I would link up with them. I would get the membership from Michael Ellis and I would study it with this other person and I would train with them every single day so they can help critique me, I can help critique them, and we can work together towards exercises that are more complex and difficult that you can't do by yourself and you need a training partner. So that would be the approach that I would go if I was doing a more cost effective way of doing it. And once I felt like I was doing pretty well, then I would start training people in the community. Then I would probably go back on Nextdoor and say, hey, anybody need help with their dogs? I'm learning how to train dogs and I can work with you and your dog for free in return for a review or letting me know what I can do to get better. Now, if you have the time and you have the budget to go to a school, excuse me, then Michael Ellis doesn't have, I don't think he's doing the in-person full program that he was doing before. I think he's doing small workshops, but that's always an option. Kennelwood Academy is an option. Tom Rose School is an option. Jonathan Katz has a school, I believe, down in Texas. That's an option. Star Mark Academy. But what it really comes down to when we're thinking about the profession of being a dog trainer, it's more about the commitment, the time, and the dedication that we have as professional trainers to get very good at being dog trainers. Because it does take a long time to really understand the ins and outs and the complexity of dog training. But then it also requires a large frame of reference. That's one of the things that was very valuable about going to the Tom Rose School. I trained my dogs in the program, but I also worked with a lot of dogs that were in their stay and train or in kennel training. Some people call it boot camp program. So I worked with lots of dogs. And the nice thing was I had other trainers that could help me when I would hit a wall or I was navigating past a few speed bumps, which adds incredible value. It increases the frame of reference. And this is something that I say to new dog trainers that are learning. I say, what separates us from the average pet owner that goes on YouTube and studies dog training content? Well, it's our frame of reference. We have a much greater frame of reference. So different things that different dogs try in different situations, we have probably seen that before, and we can take that experience and pass it on to the person that we're working with, because every dog is going to be different in some way or another. Now, if you look up different dog training programs, you might hear people saying things like, we don't do a cookie cutter format. We adjust the program according to the dog, which is important, but there are also systems. So if you've been following my training system that I do follow a pretty step-by-step process, but each step has to be adjusted according to the dog that we're working with. So for example, some dogs have lower thresholds. And what I mean by that is some dogs might react easier or faster than other dogs. And this could be something that could make going on a walk more difficult. If you have a dog that reacts very easily to another dog that's in a yard behind a fence, and you have another dog that has a lower threshold, they're going to have a different level of tolerance for this. And of course, we have to adjust according to these dogs. Now, I know I started going in a bunch of different directions, so I hope I did answer that question. And now it's time for the next question. And looks like we have a lot of people asking questions. This is excellent, really good. So I'm going to go down the line. How do you train a service dog for fainting spells? Is that something I can do alone? Now, when it comes to teaching a dog a behavior, and we want that to link up with some kind of physical cue. So if I want a dog to, let's say, press an alert button, if I were to pass out, faint, or if I want the dog to go and get somebody, if I were to faint, whatever I want the dog to do, I have to be able to teach the dog that behavior. That comes first. This goes with even adding verbal commands. So whether my cue or my signal to get the dog to do a behavior is a physical or a verbal, I first have to get the dog to perform the behavior through some kind of physical cue. Meaning I can teach the dog that raising my hand is a signal for the dog to go into a down. That's a physical command in a sense. So if I do this, the dog has to lay down. Well, first I have to get the dog to lay down before I can get the dog to respond to my hand going up in the air. And this is going to be the same thing with behaviors that we do, and we want the dog to respond to that. If I faint and I want my dog to respond a certain way, first I teach the dog the behavior, whatever it is. So if I want the dog, let's say, to press an alert button, that could be a good option. First, I'm going to teach the dog to how to press the button. Now, I have a video on my YouTube channel where I teach a dog how to press a button. I teach Ari how to press a button, those little goofy ones where you press the button and it makes a sound. You can program it to say different words. Or you can teach a dog how to press a button to go outside, whatever. We're teaching the dog the act of pressing the button. So we would have to do that first. And there's different ways to do that, which I explain in the video. One of the easier ways is to teach the dog a handshake. And the way that I do that is I place food in my hand, I close my hand, and then I give my dog an opportunity to try to get it. Most dogs will try to paw at it. The moment they paw at it, I reward the dog. Now, I can mark that behavior by saying yes. And yes is classically conditioned to predict a reward. So the dog paws at it. Yes. I open my hand. I give the dog the reward. I get the dog to do that each time. Now I place the button that I want the dog to press in my hand. I offer that up to the dog. The dog presses it. Now I reward the dog. Then eventually I fade my hand out of the picture and I get the dog to press the button. Then I get the dog to do it next to me while I'm laying down. So I go through all these steps to get the dog to do exactly what I want. Then, after I get the dog to do that, the way that I like to do it, depending on the complexity of the behavior, is I will put the behavior on a verbal command. So I'll tell the dog verbal command, I'll say press the button or whatever the command is, it doesn't matter. Now we know when we're teaching a command, in order for our dogs to learn the command has to come before the physical cue. And I talk about this quite a bit. This is known as overshadowing. If I say the command at the exact same time I present the physical cue, the dog focuses on the physical cue and not the actual command, and then I'm not teaching the dog the command. It has to go in a sequence. The command comes first, then we offer the physical cue. So it becomes a pattern that the dog can recognize. And this makes sense. If we think about how the brain operates, so let's look at the human brain. We have the prefrontal cortex, and we have something known as a working memory. A working memory lasts 15 to 30 seconds for most people on average. So when we have something happen within our day-to-day routine, if we don't take that information within 15 to 30 seconds and transfer it to our hippocampus in a way that's intentional, so if I meet somebody for the first time and I'm like, hey, Josh, how's it going? It's really nice to meet you. And then I start thinking about something else, I'm not going to remember Josh's name. But if I meet Josh, I'm like, hey, Josh, how you doing? And then I start thinking about like, Josh, okay, I know Josh. Oh, yeah, Josh I went to high school with. Yeah, he was a good friend of mine. Okay, excellent. Josh, this Josh. Okay, great. Now I remember it. Now, of course, I'm doing all that in my head. But if I don't do that, I forget it. This is why we can set things down and we start looking around and we go, where's my keys? Where did I place my phone? Because we weren't focused on it. We were focused on something else. And now this is the same with our dogs. So if I do two things at one time, the dog's not going to learn. So we separate it. Again, it's known as overshadowing if we do it at the same time. So now I get the dog responding to the verbal command, whatever that command may be. Button, let's say, doesn't matter. So I say button, I present the physical cue, dog does the behavior. I keep doing this until eventually I say button and my dog presses the button. Okay, excellent. Now I have to get the dog generalized to it, and I have to get the dog to do the behavior without the verbal command and only responding to my physical cue of passing out or fainting. So now I act that behavior out. Once I act it out, then I tell the dog to press the button. The dog presses the button, I reward the dog. If we think about how a dog learns, they're really good at recognizing patterns. So if dog knows that 1 always leads to 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm using numbers as a simple example. And let's say 1, 2, 3, each one is a different element within the sequence. So 1 is me laying down, 2 is me telling the dog to press the button, 3 is the dog pressing the button, 4 is me marking the behavior and delivering the reward. Once the dog knows that 1 leads to 5, and if 5 is a reward, the moment the dog sees 1, they jump to whatever is necessary to get to 5. They want to get to the reward more quickly. So they'll skip the other steps. So I lay down, dog goes, ooh, I know where this is leading to. They do the behavior, we give the reward. Now we have the dog responding to the behavior of the physical cue or the physical command, in a sense, of the fainting or passing out. So that's how I deal with behaviors for service dogs that are involuntary. So this is an example that I talk about quite a bit. I had someone who I was training a service dog for, and they had very, very extreme anxiety. And when they would start to panic, they would look up and they would start to breathe very heavy and very noticeable. But it was an involuntary action. Once I recognized that this was a behavior that they would do, we wanted to teach the dog to signal them, hey, you're a little stressed. It's probably best we leave this situation. And the way that we did that is I taught the dog to nudge me. So I used a target. In this case, I used a sticky pad, and I taught the dog to target the sticky pad. I even did this in my show on Animal Planet called Rescue Dog to Super Dog. And once I got the dog to nudge the sticky pad, I transferred a piece to my leg. I got the dog to nudge that. Once I had that down, this one I didn't add a verbal command. I just showed the physical cue. And the physical cue for this dog was I'd put my hand in my pocket and I'd move my hand like this in my pocket, and that would signal the dog to tap my leg with his muzzle. And so I would look up, and then I would signal to the dog would tap my leg, I would mark and reward that behavior. And I did that over and over again up until a point where I looked up and the dog tapped my leg. And then we just do that in multiple different environments until the dog becomes generalized, and they'll do that regardless of what's going on in the environment. And so, again, this is how I will teach a dog to perform a very specific action to an involuntary behavior that we as the humans do. Okay, let's go to the next one. Protective barking excessively. So when it comes to barking, the context is going to matter a great deal. But first, we'll simplify it. If I have a dog that's barking, this is what would fall under what I like to call a teachable moment. So when we look at different behaviors that our dogs are doing or different issues that we may be having, there's two main issues. We have obedience issues. This could be as simple as a dog not listening to a basic command, or it could be something more complex within advanced obedience, but it still falls under non-compliancy to a command. And then we also have dogs violating a stay. So those I would consider obedience. For behavioral, we have dangerous, destructive, fear, anxiety also falls under fear, aggression, or behaviors we don't want a dog to perform. Now, a dog could be doing something within a combination of these. So a dog could be doing something that is dangerous, but it's also based on fear. And knowing what's causing the behavior is going to change how we respond to it. So this is where we adjust according to the dog that we're working with, and of course, according to the context of the situation. Let's just say I have a dog that likes to bark randomly in the house at different things, different noises, and let's assume in this situation that it's not fear. The dog has a good time barking. This is what I would categorize as a self-reinforcing behavior. We have intrinsic and extrinsic behaviors. Extrinsic behaviors fall under those four quadrants of operant conditioning: your positive and negative reinforcement, positive and negative punishment. These things cause dogs and humans to act in a specific way because of these extrinsic factors. I'm going to do this because it gives me a paycheck. I'm going to not speed because I don't want to get a speeding ticket. That's going to adjust our behavior. Intrinsic is we do it because it feels good. So you don't have to pay a kid to play video games. Playing video games is the reward. When I'm doing protection training with a dog, I don't have to send the dog in for a bite on the decoy and then after the bite, give the dog a treat. That's not necessary because the act of biting the decoy is the reward. And so that's an intrinsic behavior. It feels good to do certain things, and we continue to do these things. So if the dog is barking and it is an intrinsic behavior, the dog is doing it because it feels good, then the approach that I follow for all my behaviors that I would consider self-reinforcing is I first start with what I call a teachable moment. So a teachable moment is when I show a dog the preferred behavior. This is when I use my marker that predicts negative reinforcement. So before moving forward, let's quickly define what a marker is, at least the way that I like to define it. I define a marker as a word or sound that predicts any one of the four quadrants of opera conditioning. So if I have a sound that predicts positive reinforcement, I say yes and I give the dog a treat or I give the dog a toy. That's going to be a marker. If I say wrong and I implement leash pressure, which is negative reinforcement, and just to clarify for those of you that may not understand the difference between the four, keep in mind that positive means adding and negative means taking away. Reinforcement means encouraging the repeat. Punishment means preventing the repeat. The positive and the negative happens after the behavior. The dog sits, then I give him the treat. I added something to the equation to encourage the repeat of the behavior. Leash pressure. I turn on pressure, the dog sits, I turn off pressure. The negative, the removal of the pressure, happened after the behavior, reinforcing the act of sitting using negative reinforcement. The dog breaks a stay, and I give the dog a leash pop. Positive punishment. I added to the equation after the behavior. The breaking of the stay triggered the positive punishment. Or let's say I'm about to reward my dog for doing a great job on their stay, and as I go to reward my dog breaks the position early. Now the dog's not getting the reward. Negative punishment. I'm taking something that the dog assumed was coming towards them. They don't have to have it in order for us to take it away. They have to believe that they're about to get it. So if my dog thinks I'm going to give him a treat, and then he violates a rule within the game that we're playing, and the treat goes away, that's negative punishment. Same thing if we do it with a toy. Same thing with it. Let's say you have a 10-year-old kid and they know next week you're going to Six Flags Magic Mountain or Great America, and they do something they're not supposed to, and you go, well, we're not going to Great America or Six Flags next week. That's negative punishment. They didn't already have it, but we took something that was going to be in their future away from them. And if we have a sound that predicts any one of those are going to be our markers. And these are very useful because it helps with that extrinsic motivators that we talked about before. And we use markers for three main reasons. Number one, we use a marker to bridge the gap between the behavior and the consequence. Now, a consequence is anything that a consequence is good or bad. It doesn't have to be bad. Often we hear consequence and we think it's bad. If my dog sits when I tell him to sit and I release them into a reward event and I pull out the dog's favorite tug toy and we play, that was a consequence to the compliancy of the behavior sit. Or I tell the dog to sit, they choose not to sit, and now they get a correction. That's also a consequence. So it bridges the gap between the consequence and the behavior. The closer the consequence is to the behavior, the stronger the connection in the dog's mind. And that's why we use markers. If we were able to deliver the actual primary, whether that's food, toy, affection, or correction, or force, the moment the dog does a behavior, we would never need markers. And that would actually teach the dog faster. But we're not able to do that, and the markers help us bridge that gap. So that's the first reason why we use a marker. The second reason is when we're trying to pinpoint fine details within our training. If I'm trying to teach my dog to look at my face, for example, and I've always rewarded my dog for looking at a source. So we have two main different types of focus when it comes to obedience. I could have my dog focus on a source, which is very valuable in some context. A lot of trainers do this in protection work. They have the dog do a contact heel, so the dog maintains position through contact, but the dog maintains focus on the target, the decoy. And that would be a source focused. And then we have focus where the dog looks at us. This is actually something that I'm working on right now with Maverick. I started with him looking, that's my German Shepherd, maintaining focus on the source. He would look at the food, he would look at the toy, and I rewarded that. That's actually what I wanted. Now I'm transferring it to having him look at my face. So I might hold food off to the side. He stares at that, and he's looking at that, and he goes, okay, this usually gets me the reward. I make a little noise. The dog looks back at me. Yes, now I reward. So that gave me the ability to pinpoint that detail of the dog looking at me and not looking at the source without creating any confusion by using the marker. And then the last reason why we use a marker is to bridge the gap, or I'm sorry, I already said that, is to release and reward the dog simultaneously. This is very helpful when we are doing the implied stay. So that's the stay that I like to do. I put a dog in a position, they maintain the position until I release them. So I went over all this because we were talking about excessive barking. So first, during a teachable moment, I want to show the dog preferred behavior. When it comes to a self-reinforcing or an intrinsic behavior, the way that I like to look at it is we either prevent, redirect, or correct. So I prevent the dog from barking, however I could do that, or I redirect the dog to a different behavior. I say, don't bark at that, focus on me instead, and then I can reward the dog for that. Or I correct the dog, and when I say correct, I'm using positive punishment to stop the behavior. So I'm adding something, usually a leash pop or a remote training collar stim. I don't like to use my hands for corrections, and I recommend others not to use their hands. Our hands should be seen as a positive or something that brings value to our dog. If my hand is going towards my dog, I want my dog to think that I might pet my dog, I might give my dog a treat, I might have toys, I have something of value. So I don't like my hands to be seen as a negative from my dog's perspective. I don't want my hand to come towards them and them to think, okay, this is bad, now I'm going to bite the hand. That's not what we want. So if I am going to use positive punishment, there's a very, very systematic way of doing this, because when it comes to working with our dogs, if we are going to correct them, we have to make sure the correction is fair. If a dog is not able to escape a correction, avoid the correction, prevent the correction from happening, and they don't understand what caused the correction, we are going to increase the stress that our dog experiences, which is going to negatively affect our dog's behavior. This can often come out in forms of perceived aggression. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with people where they tell me their dog is aggressive. We look at what's actually taking place and we find out that it was a flaw in the training that was causing the aggression. And once we fix that, the aggression often goes away because the dog had become frustrated. So now, when a dog does a behavior that I categorize as a teachable moment, I show the dog the preferred behavior. So in this situation, I could teach the dog a quiet command. Now, there's a few different ways of doing this. You might look up videos and they might say something like, get the dog to bark. Once the dog barks, tell them quiet. When they stop, reward them. This may work to an extent. So an example in a video that I saw, the trainer knocked on the wall, the dog barked, the trainer said quiet, the dog became quiet because there was no more knocking, and then they rewarded that behavior. Usually what I do to teach a dog not to bark is I use leash pressure. So when I use leash pressure, first, before I use leash pressure, I teach the dog the concept of leash pressure. Leash pressure is negative reinforcement. Let me use a human analogy to make this a little bit clear as to how negative reinforcement works and how we can minimize stress when we use negative reinforcement. Imagine you've never been in a car before, and you get into my car, and you sit down, and the seatbelt warning starts to go off. Beep, beep, beep. And you don't know what's causing that beeping, and you don't know how to turn it off. And you even ask me, you go, how do I turn this off? And I go, figure it out. And so now you start getting frustrated. It's not going away. You start hitting things. And now it's increasing the cortisol because you don't know what to do, and it's becoming more and more stressful. Now, if the beeping started to go off, and I said, you just got to buckle your seatbelt, and it turns it off. And you go, oh, okay. And you buckle your seatbelt, and the beeping stops. Excellent. That's what we do when we're using negative reinforcement. So if you've watched my videos on leash pressure, before I teach leash pressure, I want to make sure I can get the dog to do the behaviors. I don't use leash pressure to teach behaviors. I use leash pressure to reinforce behaviors. So if I'm lifting up on the leash and I want that to be a signal for my dog to go into a sit, I don't use the leash pressure to teach the dog that. I use the pre-established food lure to teach the dog the pressure. So in fact, I have a little doggy example here. So let's say, this is actually my daughter's toy, but let's say I have the dog in front of me and I lift up on the leash pressure, just enough for the dog to feel. Once the dog feels it, I keep the leash pressure up. I use my other hand, I lure the dog sits, I turn off the pressure, I give the dog the reward. Since the pressure starts first, if you recall what we talked about earlier, it goes in a sequence. 1 leads to 2 to 3 to 4. If the end result is a reward or something the dog likes, then they will jump to that. So instead of waiting for me to say sit, when I lift up, dog goes, I know how to turn this pressure off. They sit and we reward them. So this removes any of the stress associated with it because we are giving the dog the answer. And I do this with all the different ways I want a dog to react to leash pressure. Now, I can use leash pressure to teach the quiet command. The dog starts to bark, I say quiet. That's the command. And with something like this, I want to be clear here as well. I often talk about not naming a command until you either know you can get the dog to do the behavior or they're performing it the way that you like. If I'm using the negative reinforcement, I know I'm going to get the dog to do the behavior. And I'm not worried about any kind of precision. This also triggers what I call a reinforcement event. We have reward event, reinforcement event, and correction event. A reinforcement event is any time we want our dog to do a behavior or an action. In this case, the action is to stop barking. So I say quiet, I lift up on the leash, not enough to choke the dog out, a signal for a behavior. And I wait. The moment the dog stops barking, I can mark it if I want with a positive reinforcement marker. So I can say yes, I can turn it off and I can reward. Or since this falls under, as I categorize it as a teachable moment, I don't give the dog the reward. And the reason why is because we are being reactive to the dog. I am reacting. This isn't like I'm giving the dog a command and then they're doing it. That's more proactive on our part. If I'm reacting to the dog barking, dog starts to bark, quiet. I tell it to quiet. I signal it. It's quiet. I reward it. I need to be careful because there are a lot of dogs that will go, oh, you want me to bark, so you could tell me to be quiet so I can get the reward. This is why with teachable moments, I don't reward. Some people do, and then you can remove the reward later. This is going to be personal preference. Think of these as guidelines, not necessarily rules. But for me, I don't reward, but I will tell the dog, good dog. So I go quiet, I lift up, dog stops barking. Good, nice job, buddy, very nice. He barks again, quiet, and I can do the cue again. Or alternatively, I could use my marker that predicts negative reinforcement. Now, in this situation, I actually do prefer to use the quiet command because I want to teach the dog how to respond to quiet. Now, with all my commands, once I get the dog performing the command and they are 80% proficient on that command, this goes for all my commands. If they're 80% proficient on the command in that environment, then I will correct, again, using positive punishment for non-compliancy to the command. Meaning I tell the dog quiet and the dog goes quiet. And I do this over and over and the dog proves to me that they understand that command. If they're not 80% proficient, after I give the command, I provide the physical cue. I give them the answer. So if we think about the physical cue that triggers the behavior, then we present that as the answer to the question, and the command is the question. And if they're not 80% proficient, we give them the benefit of the doubt, and we give them the answer if they don't give us the answer. So if I tell a young child, let's say a 4-year-old, I go, hey, or 3-year-old, maybe not 3, maybe 4 or 5, 4, I'm not quite sure when they start learning math. But for the sake of this part of the conversation, let's say I go, what's 2 plus 2? If they're thinking about the answer, so if they're going, I'm going to let them think about the answer. If I see a blank look on their face, what's 2 plus 2? It's 4. I'm going to give them the answer. If they give me a wrong answer, then I have one of 2 options that I usually choose. So I can either A, give them the right answer. What's 2 plus 2? 3. It's 4. Or I can ask the question again. What's 2 plus 2? 3. What's 2 plus 2? 4. Yay, good job. And that's how I treat a dog when they're in the learning phase. So if I can tell that the dog's processing the information, you say down and the dog goes, you can tell they're thinking about it, I'm going to let them figure it out. And if they do it, I'm going to give them a big celebration, big reward. I'm going to make a big deal out of it. And this goes with the quiet command as well. But then once they're 80% proficient, if I give them the command, now, if they give me an answer, see, I don't punish when they give an answer if they give me the wrong answer. I follow the same protocol that I just said. If the dog's 80% proficient or better, and I say, what's 2 plus 2? And they say 3, meaning I say sit and they go down, I could just repeat the command or I can give them the answer. But if I give them the question and they go, I'm not answering that, that's when I would say no. I use the word no. Now, some people advise against that. They say, oh, we use the word a lot in conversation. And that is true. We do use the word no, whether we know something, we don't know something, no, don't do that. Remember, it's how you say something. So with my dogs, my no is not no like that. It's no. It's very distinct. So when I do say it, they know that that is well, they don't know it's a marker, like they don't say that in their head, but they know that that is the predictor of a correction event, what I call a correction event. And remember why we use the markers. So I would say no upon non-compliancy. The dog gets the correction, whether it's a leash pop or a stim on a remote training collar. After the correction, if the dog is doing what I want, I say, good job, good dog. If they are not doing what I want, then I recommand and I assist them. So we'll use a simple example. If I tell a dog down and the dog says, whatever, I'm not doing it, I say no, and I correct the dog, then I would say down again. And if the dog does it, great, good job. If they don't do it, I help them do it. And I use the leash. So I would assist them with the leash. They lay down, good dog. Meaning I wouldn't go down, no correction, down, no correction, down, no correction. And then we can use this when we're communicating with our dog when they are barking. We have to follow through with it. Now, if our dog is barking because it's a fear-based behavior, we cannot use positive punishment to stop a fear-based behavior. Actions need to be looked at in a different way from an emotional response. If our dog has an emotional response to something, and this is an example that Michael Ellis gives, and I think it's a great example. If I have a dog that fear barks, I could possibly use positive punishment and stop that fear barking, but I'm not going to change the fear. The fear is still going to be there. So instead, when we're dealing with fear-based behaviors, my main approach is pretty much always a combination of counter-conditioning and desensitization. And what that means is we figure out the dog's threshold for whatever it is that they're afraid of, and we don't cross it because we don't want a bad reaction, and then we pair it with something pleasant. We're using classical conditioning. That's what counter-conditioning is. The way that I like to define classical conditioning, it's a dog's recognition of a pattern outside of their control. And once they recognize the first element within that sequence, we see a change of behavior. So it could be a pattern that predicts something good. The dog might salivate in anticipation of food. The dog might do a happy dance in anticipation of play. The dog might start to pant and shed their coat in anticipation of something stressful. So we see the change of behavior once the first element within the sequence is presented to the dog. And these could be very long sequences. Now, we use classical conditioning when we're getting our dog conditioned to the markers, but classical conditioning is way more complex than that. There's more nuances, and it fits more within our dog's world. Dogs become classically conditioned by lots of things. And if our dog becomes classically conditioned to something that they perceive as bad, so the example that I said where the dog might start panting or shedding their coat through stress and anxiety response, then we can change whatever that means to the dog by changing what it predicts. Let's say I have a dog that the only time they go to the car is when they go to the vet or they go to a boarding facility. The dog learned this pattern, so once you get them to the car, they start to pant, they start to shed their coat, they're very anxious and nervous about this. Then what I can do is I could bring the dog to the car, not even put him in the car, and then I can, excuse me, then I can do something fun. And I do this over and over and over and over again till that original classically conditioned response is changed. And now operant conditioning is a dog's recognition of a pattern within their control. Or at least we want them to believe that they're in control. I do this, this happens. I do that, that happens. Or this or that might happen. Now, I know this was a very long answer to what seemed like a simple question, but this stuff falls in line with lots of stuff that we do within dog training. And this is why I like having a system. I adjust the system according to the dog, but by having this roadmap, it makes it very easy for me to deal with situations when they come up because I already know what category it falls under. So I hope that answered your question. And I hope it also answered a lot of other questions for those of you that are listening. And thank you, by the way, for listening. I really appreciate it. If you can't tell, I'm very passionate about this stuff and I love talking about dog training. And now that I have this new setup, which I said in the beginning, I'm still trying to figure it out. I had a company help me. I'm not this technically savvy. I used to be a little bit more technically savvy, but they helped me set it up. So I'm still learning and trying to figure it out, but it's going to give me the opportunity to do more live Q&As because the setup and the process is significantly easier than it was before. So let's see the next question. Okay. How can I help my dog not be so reactive? She is a German Shepherd, walks well on leash until she sees another dog. So this one is going to fall in line with a lot of the things we were talking about before, but we need to know why the dog is being reactive. Now, a lot of times people create And I'm not saying you did this, because it depends on the dog and what we were talking about earlier, the threshold. A lot of people unintentionally cause leash reactivity through the early developing stages of the puppy. They're trying to socialize their puppy, and most people, when they think about socializing, they think about the same way humans socialize. If you tell someone, hey, go out and socialize, you're not telling them to go sit in a place where there's lots of people and not communicate or talk to anybody. You mean go talk to people, go engage, go meet people, make new friends, network, sort of thing. With a dog, it's a little bit different. And of course, the situation matters a great deal. If I want my dog to walk nicely on a leash, and when it's a puppy, I take it out, and every time I come across somebody on the walk, and this is very easy to do with puppies, or I come across another dog or something like that, when you have a puppy and you come across somebody, the odds are they're going to ask you if they could pet the puppy, or they're just going to come up and try to pet the puppy. Every time I'm imprinting a puppy, when that happens, I tell them no. I don't say it in a rude or obnoxious way. I say, oh no, I'm sorry, I'm training this dog to be a service dog, and we can't have him focusing on other people in the environment. And most of the time it's not true. It could be a puppy I'm raising for myself. And I know I'm lying when I say that, but I do that because it usually is an easier way to let people down. They go, oh, okay, most people are going to understand that, and then they're going to leave you alone and you can go back to your training. I see socializing a young puppy more so as getting my puppy to experience lots of different things, to come in close proximity with lots of things, and to pair those experiences with something pleasant, usually connected with me, food, toy, play, something like that, and not so much direct engagement with other things. When we take a puppy out and we let people say hi, we let other dogs come up to it when we're on a walk, then that becomes the norm. And usually a couple things might happen. One, the dog really likes it, and then we take it away. We go, nope, you're not saying hi to other people and other dogs on walks anymore. This creates frustration. Frustration turns into a behavior that looks or seems as though it's leash reactivity. I say this because this is what a lot of protection trainers do. Now, I've probably spent about 6 years of my career doing protection training, but I did it as a sport. I wasn't training police dogs or military dogs or actual personal protection dogs. I was doing sport protection, so PSA and French ring primarily. A little bit of Mondio ring, not very much, and some IGP, so very sport related. They might do some things different with civil dogs, dogs that are actually doing police or military work. And I've done some protection with a couple police dogs that were in clubs, but not like directly with police departments. So I want to be very clear on that. When we are doing protection training with a dog for sport work, it is pretty much always play. We are always using prey drive. And one of the things that we teach dogs is what they call a bark and hold. This is in the different protection sports. And this is where the dog goes up to the decoy or the helper, depends on what you want to call it. It's the person in the bite suit, wearing the bite sleeve, whatever. And the dog has to come up to them and bark. And they continue to bark until they're given the reward. A lot of the foundation, the way I can't speak for every protection dog trainer, but the way that I've done it and other people that I've trained with is we have the dog on a back tie and we essentially tease them with something that they see valuable. We tease them with a tug toy, a bite sleeve, something. We get them really excited, and when they get frustrated enough, they start to bark. It looks just like leash reactivity, and we reward that. We get closer to the dog, they bark some more, we get closer, they bark some more, we get closer, all the way till we reward the dog with the bite. And now we can activate that. We can turn it on and off through communication with their obedience. So if I have a dog that's becoming reactive on leash, so either A, the dog's getting frustrated because they can't get what they used to have, or B, a good defense is a good offense, or you know the saying, a good defense, they're defensive, so they act offensive, right? So they're doing a deterrent. They're barking to get them to go away. I don't like people coming up to me and touching me. I don't like other dogs invading my space, so I'm going to bark as a deterrent. And then the other reason why it might happen is it could just be what we talked about earlier, the dog's threshold. They become reactive just because that's where they are. So you could have, and of course, dogs' genetics play a big role. You can have a dog that, let's use a happy-go-lucky golden retriever.
This dog's probably not going to protect the house. That's not what they're bred for. A criminal comes in the house, dog probably gets excited, wants to lick them, hoping that they might get a treat or go on a walk. And then you have other dogs who are bred more so for protective type purposes, and these dogs will instinctively bark and be aggressive at people that come into their environment. So genetics are going to play a big role on this. The way that I approach most leash reactivity is a lot of times when it happens to clients of mine, and it is a common issue, in-person dog training, I'll show up at the house. And I was talking to Larry Crone about this during the podcast that we did. And they'll be standing outside. This is the first time I'm meeting them, the first time I'm meeting their dog. And they're there with their leash and they're like, okay, let's go on this walk. And I say, no, we can't go on the walk just yet. We need to go inside. I need to establish a relationship with your dog. And I need to show the dog how I'm going to communicate with them. I need to be able to let the dog know what to do, how to do it, what not to do, and to clearly reward and direct the dog. So communication is the foundation of everything. So I take the dog inside, and often the dogs just haven't been clearly communicated with. So I'll build a relationship, and of course, depending on the dog is going to depend on how long that takes. Most dogs, you can establish a relationship pretty quickly. You give them some treats, you pet them, good dog, as long as the dog is not aggressive towards people or very fearful. This is usually a pretty quick process. Then I do some basic luring. I get the dog to follow the food. I do some basic engagement work. I show the dog leash pressure. And I've done this with so many dogs that I can often get these 3-4 steps: relationship building, engagement, luring, and leash pressure in 30 minutes or so, which is long time to be working with a dog. That 30 minutes is broken down by me doing something, talking to the owners, me doing something, talking to the owners, and I'm giving the dog all the answers. Once I establish that, and I feel like I have a good relationship, I can communicate with the dog, and of course, depending on how bad the situation is with the dog, however long it takes, let's say it's 1 session, let's say it's 5 sessions, then I go out and I take the dog on a walk. This is also something very important to keep in mind. And this is another thing I brought up in the podcast. When I release it, if you watch it, you'll see it. There's a show on Netflix called Explained, and there's an episode all about dogs. And they do this study where they take, I used to say saliva, it's not saliva. They take the sweat from different people at different emotional states. And the way that they did that was they would show these people different movies or different scenes. I believe they showed The Shining to get the people afraid, and they showed Winnie the Pooh or something like that. So they showed different things to trigger different emotional states. And so they collected the sweat from someone who was happy, someone who's a little nervous, someone who was a little afraid. So all these different emotional reactions that they had, and they put it into a container and they put it in a room, and they left, it was just that in the room, and then they brought the dog in. The dog would naturally go and investigate it because it was the only thing in the room. I think it was the only thing in the room. And once the dog smelled it, they would react as though they were around the person at that emotional state. So the person who was happy, when they smelled it, the dog started wagging their tail, their ears were up. They're like, where's this happy person? The one that was fearful, when they smelled it, their ears went back, their tail went tucked, they backed away, and they were very cautious. So when someone says, oh, you need to act confident, you need to do whatever, confidence is a byproduct of knowing what to do. You can't act confident. You can act it, but a dog's going to smell right through it, literally. So when dogs are reactive, usually with their owners, they're often not reactive with the dog trainer. And it's not because the dog trainer has some kind of magical touch. It's because we're more confident because we've worked with a lot of different dogs. And so when we go out, I can't tell you how many times this happened. I go out with a dog and their owners, and we actively go looking for other dogs for the dog to react. Oh, there's a dog, and we go, and the dog looks at me and looks at the other dogs and looks back at me, and the dog doesn't react. And it's because, one, I'm communicating clearly with the dog, but number two, the dog can smell that I have control of the situation. Bill Burr, one of my favorite comedians, one of his older bits, he talks about this. He says, I guess the dog's just feeding off me. Because I go, someone's coming. I go, oh, shoot, someone's coming. Oh, shoot, someone's coming. My dog's going to react. Oh, shoot. And my dog goes, oh, shoot, what? Oh, shoot, what? Rawr! And then the dog reacts. It's a really good bit, but it's pretty accurate. They're feeding off of us. And so by doing obedience training, in fact, If you're not already familiar, I have a course on Sit, Stay, Learn. It's on sale right now, so sitstaylearn.com. And if you go there, I think my course is $45 right now. It's a 5.5 hour course. And the course is specifically designed to enhance handler skills. So there's certain exercises that are not directly to influence a dog's behavior, but it makes you as a handler better. And as a byproduct, you have a better trained dog. And if you go through that entire course, I promise you, your confidence is going to go up and you're going to have a much better understanding, and you're going to be able to deal with most situations when they arise with your dog. And simply by having those communication channels down with your dog and by having that added real confidence, not fake, you're going to see a massive difference. And again, looking at the threshold that we talked about before, if the reactivity is fear, then we want to use the counter conditioning and desensitization. So the way I look at counter conditioning, we can reduce whatever the stimulus is that's causing the change of behavior, usually through volume, size, and distance. If I can reduce the size, if I can increase the distance, or I can lower the volume, then it makes it easier for the dog to deal with it. I'll give you a simple example. If I'm getting a dog conditioned to gunfire, and let's say the dog's already afraid of gunfire, and it's let's say a police dog, just for the sake of this example, I would go to a firing range, but I would go far enough away from the firing range to where the dog can hear the gunfire, but I'm not close enough to where I'm getting a negative reaction from the dog. And then I'm going to play with the dog. I'm going to do tug, I'm going to do food play, whatever. And you can do a lot of play with food. I can toss a piece of food that way. I can toss a piece of food the other way. Dog comes back. I can have it catch another piece. And I can incorporate obedience with play. Or I can use a tug, but I'm going to make it a very fun experience. And then each day I'm going to get closer and closer until I'm pretty close where it's not hurting our ears and the dog is no longer worried about it. And this is the same with dogs that are reactive because of fear with other dogs that are reactive of people because of fear, whatever it is. My personal favorite approach, like there's BAT, behavioral adjustment training. I don't usually use that just because it takes a very long time, whereas controlling it through counter conditioning and desensitization. And so desensitization is we're exposing it over and over, we're pairing it to something pleasant. And remember, counter conditioning is classical conditioning, but it's something that the dog perceives as negative, and we're changing it by making it predict something positive. So I know, again, a very long answer to a question, but I like to hit the details because I really want each one of you, when you are working with your dog, I want you to have a deeper understanding of why you're doing what you're doing. If you don't understand the why behind the action, you're less likely to do it, and you're less likely to do it correct. So we have to understand these things. They matter quite a bit. And the more you hear it over and over again, the more it's going to start. So in the military, they use Bloom's taxonomy. So if you're on the computer, you could type it in right now, Bloom's taxonomy. Some people have it organized differently, but I believe it's knowledge, application, comprehension, analysis, and then synthesis. So knowledge is where you get the information. You don't completely understand it all, but you're getting that information, you're hearing it, and you're trying your best to retain it. And then you have application. You start putting it into action, but you still don't fully understand it. And then you get that aha moment, that comprehension, where you go, oh, this all makes sense. Oh my gosh. And then, of course, analysis. And I think every professional dog trainer, if you're a professional dog trainer, you should be at least at the analysis level. Meaning you can look at somebody else, what they're doing with their dog, and you can see the entire picture and go, this is happening because of this. You're not getting the results because you're doing this or you're doing that. It's kind of funny. I'm bringing up Larry again because I'm editing the podcast right now. I'm going through it and making sure I'm cutting out the curse words and things like that. And there's one part where he was working with someone through a virtual session, and he said, send me a couple videos of you working with your dog. And then when he got on the call, he goes, you're doing everything wrong. And the guy felt bad for a second. He goes, no, this is a good thing. Because if you were doing everything right and you were still having these issues, now this is way more difficult to work through. And so a lot of times the things that we see as our dogs having issues, often it's mistakes that we're making. And if you don't recognize the mistakes that you're making, or you don't know you're making mistakes, either have someone watch you with your dog or film yourself. Very, very valuable. I love the saying, champions study game footage. If you watch yourself, you're going to start to be able to point out or pinpoint these mistakes you're making. You might go, ooh, I'm pairing my command with my physical cue. Oh, right there. I told my dog to sit and my dog sat, and then I corrected my dog into a down. Oh, because you were thinking down in your head, but you said sit. Or your dog broke the stay because you said here because you were talking to someone else and you didn't realize it, and the dog broke, and then you corrected the dog. So these are things you can notice when you film it, which is very, very helpful. In fact, I had a client once that every time he was around his dog and working with his dog, he had his GoPro on his head. And so he documented everything. And then he would go back and watch it. Now he was watching first person perspective, but he was still able to see things through watching that footage after the fact. Okay, I hope that was helpful. And we still have 74 people watching, so I hope this is entertaining as well. Very cool. Okay. Oh my goodness, it just jumped very far down. Okay. I'm interested in being a dog trainer. Yeah, so Lindsay, I hope that was helpful. If you're not already a member on Michael Ellis's online program, you got to do it. Anyone who's listening, if you are interested in being a dog trainer and you're not signed up for Michael Ellis, you're doing yourself a disservice. $70 a month, absolute steal. And by the way, I'm not an affiliate, so by saying it, I'm not making money off of it. It's truly, it's worth way more than that. Easily hundreds. Okay. Hi from Scotland. Awesome. I've been to Scotland, had a great time out there. When can I use a prong collar? I have a 5-month-old border collie. Is she too young? Okay, so the way in which we use certain tools matters a great deal, and then it matters with the dog. So with remote collar training, for example, I will start a remote collar on a dog usually between 7 and 9 months. Now, there's trainers that start later. I think Michael Ellis, I was just talking about him, I think he starts at 1.5 years. I started a little bit earlier because I like to get my dogs to off-leash status. That's very important for me. I like to get my dogs off-leash because then I can do more things with them. I can take them out on hikes. So one of the things that I do with my dogs is I do a little morning exploration walk. We just go on a walk. Usually there's no one out at that time. And we walk around, and my dogs are dogs. They run, they play with each other, they smell things, they pee on stuff. They just explore. That's very difficult to do if I don't have my dog off-leash trained. So I usually start pretty early, but I have a very systematic approach to it. Now, also, if we're using a prong collar, which prong collars are fine, remote collars are fine, it's all about application. And like I said before, when it comes to corrections, I have a very, very systematic approach to adding corrections. So let's look at behavioral issues. Dangerous or destructive behaviors, if those are not based on fear or aggression, so digging, getting into the trash, chewing on furniture, I usually use positive punishment right away to correct those. Now, keep in mind, I categorize them as dangerous or destructive if they are actually dangerous and destructive very quickly. And so what I mean by that, a lot of times when I have a young puppy, if I have a 4-month-old puppy and that puppy goes to bite on the rug, I just prevent them. I stop them. I redirect them. I don't punish them. The reason why is because they're so small, unless I'm just not paying attention to my puppy, which that's a no-no anyways. If you have a puppy and that puppy is out, you need to be paying attention to it, even if it's in a playpen, because you don't want the puppy to climb over the playpen. You don't want them to relieve themselves in the playpen. So puppies require full supervision when they're not in the crate. So if they're outside of the crate, I'm watching them anyways. And if they go to bite on the carpet or the rug, or I'm just going to redirect them to something different. I'm going to prevent it every single time they try to do it. That's something that I had with my German Shepherd Maverick. When he was a puppy, I'm working on my computer and I had him around me and I was watching him, and he tried to bite on one of the wires and I just stopped him. I wasn't worried about it because he wasn't capable of doing anything because he was still so young. Now, if an older dog goes to bite on a wire or something like that, I am going to correct it right away, because now that is dangerous and destructive because their jaws and their teeth are way more powerful. If you've ever left a dog alone on a nylon leash and had it on a back tie, if you're not paying attention, that dog can bite through that leash in a matter of seconds. Maybe not, yeah, seconds, like 10 seconds, and a dog can bite through it. So these things are going to matter, but dangerous and destructive, I correct right away. Fear and aggression, Usually just putting the dog on a good training system that involves lots of play, clear communication. In fact, there was, I'm going to pull it up because I was reading this book recently. Really good book. And also, I want to make sure I don't have anything else coming up. Okay. And I took a screenshot of it. And this is directed towards humans, but this is the same for dogs. Psychological stress can be caused by a perceived lack of certainty, control, predictability, social support, or belonging. And I took a photo of it because I'm like, that is exactly the same thing with dogs. If your dog has a lack of certainty, they have no control, at least they don't think they have control. They can't predict what's going to happen. They have no social support, and they don't feel like they belong. Yeah, there's a good chance they're going to get aggressive. If you look up, and I've talked about this case a few times, and it's only because one of the only ones that I have documented as far as an aggressive dog. If you go on Google and you search Frankie with an IE, I believe, Inside Edition, they called it a demon dog, and they might even called it a devil dog. I don't like saying that because Marines are called devil dogs, but they call it like a demon dog or something. And when you see the footage, the dog looks very vicious. It's attacking the camera, and they make it sound like this dog is such an awful dog. Oh, it bit its owner 20 times, and all the aggression from this dog was a byproduct of frustration. The dog was frustrated, and the owner, she was trying to do her best. She just didn't understand dog training. And maybe she was getting wrong information from different sources, and that's difficult too because there's something known as the authority bias. You might hire a trainer, and your trainer might tell you to do something, and you go, my gut tells me this is not good. In fact, I had a lesson earlier, and really smart guy, very dedicated to his dog, really committed, and he hired these trainers, and these trainers had him doing some off the wall stuff, and he told me, he's like, I didn't feel good about it. That's why I scheduled a lesson with you so we can talk about it and figure it out. And it's the authority bias. Oh, the expert says that this is what I'm supposed to do, so that's why I'm supposed to do it. And this is another reason why I always explain the reason behind why we do certain things, because you have to understand that. And I forgot where I was with the question. Okay, prong collar. What sort of reason would we need a prong collar for 4 or 5-month-old puppy? Not too many reasons. If I'm using a remote collar, I pretty much don't need a prong collar. And with a puppy that young, so like a lot of people, they think that they need their dog to walk perfectly in the heel position all the time. One of my friends, really excellent trainer, I've mentioned him on my channel before, Austin, 0 to Hero dog training. This is something I implemented from him, and he's been training 2 years, and I've been training since 2012. And he mentioned this to me, and I'm like, that's a really good idea. That's a great way to do loose leash walking. It's like we have the dog in the heel position walking with us. And if you've ever walked with a toddler, toddlers walk really slow. And you're like, come on, let's go, let's go. You want them to walk faster because they walk about half your speed. Dogs walk 2-3 times faster than we do. So we want them to walk next to us. We want them to maintain this stay position. And we don't want them to do things that they naturally want to do. They want to smell things. They want to pee on things. They want to run around. And so this is something that I picked up. I said I started using it. I got from Austin. With a puppy, if I want to incorporate, let's say, a little bit of formal obedience, I want to start working on the heel. Well, I'm doing it with food. I'm doing it with praise and play, and I'm making it fun. But then we can incorporate a little bit of the PREMAC principle. So PREMAC principle, less likely behavior for more likely behavior. And we can use a flexi. So we take a flexi leash, we put it on the dog's harness, the puppy's harness, and then we get the puppy to come into heel. Puppy comes into heel. We can use a lure, whatever we need to do to guide the dog into heel. Yeah, good puppy, break. Break is my release word. And then the puppy gets to go and run around and smell and explore. We call them back. They maintain the position. We release them again. So we're not doing a very long heel stay. And if you think about it, I call heel a mobile stay. That's what it is. It's a mobile stay. And when we do a stay, there's the 3Ds. And some of you probably have heard of it before: duration, distance, distraction. And when we start working on a stay, there's a strategic way of doing this. First, we start with a little bit of duration, but no distance, no distraction. Then we add distance without duration. We walk out and we come back pretty quickly. Then we do duration and distance. Then we come back, we do duration, no distance, and distraction. Then we finally get to distance, duration, distraction, and that's what creates dependability within the position. Well, you can't do distance really in a heel stay because the dog's right next to you. They have to maintain the position relative to us. So we have them in the position, we work duration, and then we release them. They have fun, we bring them back, and we can gradually increase it. Now with my dogs, I'll do a structured walk with them. It's usually pretty short. I have a field right down the street. I recently moved to Carmel, Indiana. Really nice place. I like it quite a bit. So if you're out here, reach out to me. We'll do some training. But a block away, I have this big field. And when I go there, I have my dogs off leash. They're on remote collars. We walk, and on the way there, a lot of times I'll give them a ball or a toy, and they run with that in their mouth. They like holding their toy, and they'll smell things, and they'll go back and forth. And then if I see someone, I use my informal with me. They come back into position, we walk, we go past the person, and then I release them again. And when I release them, I use my release word, break, which doesn't mean go take off as far as you want. It means you're released, but you still have to stay relatively close to me, which is usually about 20 feet or so. And so they're all over the place. And it's kind of funny. There's a podcast with Michael Ellis and Ivan Balabanov. If you look it up, it's like 3 years old. I was listening to this recently. And they're both laughing because they both walk around with their dogs on flexi. And if you were to be someone who doesn't know who they are, an untrained eye, you'd be like, look at these guys with their flexi leashes and their untrained dogs just running all over the place. And you hear people all the time like, oh, flexi leashes, those are stupid. Flexi leashes are terrible. It's like, no, it's application. I also use flexi leashes for recalls. I can use it to guide the dog right in the sit front position. So it's how we use it. And they're laughing because they're like, yeah, our dogs run all over the place. If I need to call them into position, great. But most people don't have very much structure with their dog. So the only time they get structure is when they go out on a walk. So point is, I'm saying all this because more likely than not, at 5 months of age, you probably don't need a prong collar. And when I'm imprinting a dog, which the imprinting stage, they say is up to 16 weeks. We usually get our puppies at 8 weeks. So we have that 8-week window. So 4 months. So you're past the imprinting stage. But all the stuff that happens when they're puppies, these things usually stick with them when they're older. So my biggest thing when I'm working with puppies is I want every experience to be as positive as possible. I want most of the stuff to be play. Like if you watch the videos that I did do with Maverick when he was a puppy, it looks mostly like play. And that's what it was. Every time I was engaging with him, I wanted him to perceive the training, not so much as like, oh, I need to learn, this is boring, this sucks. I wanted him to get excited because we were doing some training. And that training was play. And then we can transfer that into obedience. So can you use a prong collar on a 5-month-old? Yes, you can, but more likely than not, you don't need it. I usually, with a puppy, is I will do a lot of luring. I'll do some leash pressure work so they understand it, and then I use that to reinforce a lot of rules and expectations. Rare cases, you might need it, but it's very, very rare. So more likely than not, you don't need it at 5 months. Can you do it? Yeah, you can. But even if you are going to do it, you still have to do it in a very systematic way so you don't create any issues. When I work with trainers or I work with people in person, before I have them implementing or using corrections, I want them to be really good with the positive side first. I want your positive reinforcement, your markers, your timing. I want that to be spot on before you start using any corrections. Because if we make a mistake with positive reinforcement, usually not a big issue. If we make a mistake with corrections, these can be a little bit more difficult to fix. Not impossible, but the biggest thing, so any of you listening, if you're ever worried like, okay, I don't want to do corrections. If you don't want to do corrections, you don't feel comfortable with corrections, don't, because you're not going to do a good job with it. If you do want to do corrections, if you want that added stage of reliability, just never, this is my own opinion, some trainers disagree, but I never At least I try not to. I never make corrections personal, meaning I don't show my dogs that I'm mad or upset at them. If I'm mad or frustrated with my dog, I stop training, I stop working with them, I go cool off, and then I come back. I don't use anger as a way to punish dogs. It's just not something that I do. And the reason why is because anger comes off as inconsistency and unpredictability. Have you ever been around someone who has a short fuse? Not a fun person to be around. So instead, they need to know the rules, they need to know how to prevent unpleasant things from happening, and they shouldn't be personal. It's cause and effect. And they have to know what causes it. If they don't know what causes it, then your training's not adequate enough. And it's one of the reasons why when people ask me like, oh, should I do a stay and train program? Is that something that's useful? Not with me. If they're asking, they live in a different state or something like that. A lot of times I advise against hiring traditional or balanced trainers for stay and train, unless I really, really know and trust them. If you were asking me, should I do a stay and train with Bethany Perdome from PH Dogs? Absolutely. Amazing trainer. She's going to do a phenomenal job. Or Maureen Cuccinella from Spirited Canine, 100%. Balanced trainer, incredibly good trainer. Not worried about anything. But the problem with some trainers, when they use corrections to compensate for lack of enough reps and proper training, they do too many corrections too soon, too early, and they cause more issues than what they fix. And so like if I was going to take my dog to a trainer, let's say I was just feeling lazy, I got a new dog, it's for my kids, I don't feel like training it, I got other things I'm working on. Okay, I'll find a pure positive trainer. I'll have them teach all the behaviors, and then I will do the reinforcing because I don't want them to mess it up by rushing the training process. Because remember, rewards teach behaviors we want dogs to repeat. Corrections teach behaviors we don't want them to repeat. But a lot of times, people will start correcting dogs way too soon before they even know the rules of the game. This creates a lot of stress, and often this can come out as aggression. And this is some of the issues that the client who I was speaking with earlier today was having. They were having him shock the dog for everything. Shock the dog for reward. Shock the dog for punishment. Shock the dog for looking at it. Shock, 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 shock. Of course, that's going to create some aggression. So with corrections, you want to make darn sure you're really good at your timing, your positive reinforcement, and your dog knows the rules of the games before we add corrections. Okay. Sorry, let me check. I might have to, yeah. All right, I'm going to have to wrap it up. I'm going to answer one more question. I hope this has been valuable for everybody. Okay. Where were we? And sorry, everybody. I know these questions are really long. If they are helpful, even though they are pretty long, let me know. Send a thumbs up or something like that. Like the video, because I do hope that this is helpful. All right, where was I? Do you have an online program? I'll answer another one after this. The only online course that I have is the one on Sit, Stay, Learn. So sitstaylearn.com. If you're looking for an online program, again, go to Michael Ellis. The guy's a wizard. He's amazing. Okay, my German Shepherd bites or mouths to get attention. I've had him 3 months. He's nearly 12 months old. He was feral and knows no rules, boundaries, or manners. He's full on. Is tug good for him? Thanks. Okay, if he's biting or mouthing to get attention, then it's kind of funny because my wife was telling me when she walks by our German Shepherd right now, he'll try to mouth at her. And she goes, I don't really like that. And I said, well, he's not doing it as a form of being aggression. He's trying different things because he wants engagement. Like that's what he wants. So instead, think about what do we want our dogs to do? And what do our dogs want? So these are two very important things. What does the dog want? What do we want? Well, if we know what the dog wants, and the dog is actively trying things to get what they want. Oh, I mouth at you. Maybe that'll get attention. I bark at you. Maybe that will give me the attention. So if we know the dog wants attention, wants affection, wants whatever, then a very great way to get the behavior that we want is we tell the dog what we want them to do. Once they do it, then we give them the reward that they want. And when I say tell them, it doesn't have to be a verbal command. It could be a physical cue or something like that that gets them to do the behavior. But we show them, again, this is cause and effect. You do this, I give you that. You do this, I give you that. And I do it enough to where that becomes the default behavior. This is another reason why capturing is so valuable in dog training. Capturing is when we mark a behavior that the dog does without us asking for it. It's a completed behavior. So free shaping is we have the dog doing something, but they're not doing the full completed behavior, and we're marking progressive steps to get to that final behavior. But capturing, the dog does it. Dog sits, we can capture that. Yes, we can follow it up with a reward. Dog looks at us. Yes, we can follow it up with a reward. This is valuable because it starts to show the dog behaviors that we like. And then they will naturally start to offer that up when they want something. This is why when people tell me their dog, they go, my dog begs. I go, okay, tell me what your dog does when it's begging. Oh, it looks at me. It paws at me. It barks. It lays down, whatever the behavior is. And then I go, have you ever rewarded your dog for that behavior? Have you ever rewarded your dog for a shake? Have you ever rewarded your dog for speak? Have you ever rewarded your dog for a sit or a down or a look at you? And they usually say, yes, I have. How does your dog know the difference between you holding a treat for them and you holding food for yourself? They don't. They go, you have food, something of value. I do a behavior. I might get a reward. So I'm going to offer that up. And then what do we do as the human? We go, stop begging, get out of here. Ah, great. Now we just created confusion. Instead, we say, hey, how about you go to your climb bed? We get them to go to their climb bed or their place command, whatever you want to call it. And then we can reward them there. And then when we're done eating, we can reward them. And we do that over and over so they know that's the default behavior. That's what we want. And when they do that, then we can reward them instead of creating confusion by reprimanding them for doing something that we've asked them to do. But the point that I'm making is you can use capturing to start showing your dog behaviors that you like. And then you can use those behaviors just by incorporating obedience. It helps a lot. That's why I think my system is really, really valuable. And it's not really my system. It is the way in which I explain it. But again, I've had an opportunity to learn from some of the greatest trainers out there. Again, Tom Rose, if you look him up, he was a legend. Got to work with him. Dave, studied Michael Ellis an insane amount. Nino, Ivan, I studied some of his work. Forrest Mickey, amazing. And I've just taken all the things that I've learned and people that I've trained with in person to put into a system that works for me. So make sure you're following the science and apply what works for you and works with your dog to get you the results that you want. But to answer your question, because I know I'm going in a few different directions, I would incorporate obedience, and then, yes, I would use tug. Tug, ball and a rope, all these things, they don't create aggression. These are things that especially dogs that might come from some kind of working lines, or some of these dogs that are just higher energy dogs, your German Shepherds, your Malinois, your Border Collies, things of that nature, they need an outlet. Like I'll use, or think about yourself, everyone who's listening, I'm sure you all have different feelings and experiences. With me, I'll use myself as an example. I have to do physical stuff. It is in my DNA. I have to. People ask me all the time, they go, how do you have the discipline? Because I pretty much work out every single day. I train jujitsu on a regular basis. I'm always doing physical stuff. And people are, how do you have the discipline to do that? It doesn't take any discipline. If you tell me not to go to the gym for a few weeks, that would take discipline. In fact, there's been times where I've gotten frustrated because on holidays, they close my gym. I'm like, how dare you close my gym on a holiday? I'm supposed to be enjoying the holidays and I can't go to the gym? So these dogs, if they don't get this outlet, so like my dogs, German Shepherd, Malinois, British Lab, all come from working lines. If I don't exercise them, if I don't do something that mentally stimulates them, that gets them physically tired, that lets them explore and use these things, sometimes unwanted behaviors can be a byproduct of that. And there is a difference between a well-behaved dog and a well-trained dog. So you can have a dog that's very well-behaved, but not well-trained. It just doesn't have the desire to do these other things. And then you can take something like a very high-drive Malinois and you go, wow, that dog's well-trained, but not well-behaved. So behavior and training, they are two different things. So to answer the question, tug is good for him. Absolutely. Tug doesn't create aggression. That was like an old school thought. But before you reward with a tug, before you reward with a toy, make sure he's doing something that you want. Don't reward your dog for doing something that you don't want. And again, I'll use a simple example, teachable moment. Teachable moments for me is when a dog does something that I don't want. Not dangerous, not destructive, not fear, not aggression. Let's say the dog violates a boundary. I'll use my little doggy example. So let's say this is the dog entering the office. I don't want the dog in the office. The moment the dog steps in, I use the word wrong. Wrong is my marker for negative reinforcement. So I go wrong. Then I grab the dog by the leash. Usually I'll have a tab if I'm doing house rules. So that's a little short leash attached to the collar. So I'll grab the tab and then I'll guide the dog out of the room and then I'll turn off the pressure. Yay, good dog. And if the dog comes in again, wrong, I guide the dog out. I don't reward the dog after that because I am being reactive to the dog. If the dog bites my shirt and I go, knock it off, good dog, nice. Well, I just rewarded the dog for biting my shirt. So now the dog goes, oh, I bite your shirt, bite, bite, you pet me. Yay, I got exactly what I wanted. Or I walk in, you tell me to leave the room, I get a treat. Yay, I'm gonna do this again. So we have to be very, very careful with that. And that's why what I do during a teach a moment, once the dog's doing what I want, now the dog's staying outside of the room, even if he's peeking his little head in, but he's not crossing the barrier and he knows that boundary and he's staying there and he's holding it for a moment. Now I can go, yes, good. And I come back and I reward the dog. So now I'm rewarding for the preferred behavior. And if you want to learn more about the 3 events to dog training, which I highly recommend, go to my go to my website, nateschoemer.com, go to my blog, and there's an article called The 3 Key Events to Dog Training. If you understand these events, how to apply them within your dog training, and you know the exceptions to the rules, or the guidelines, I should say, dog training becomes significantly easier, and it's a 15-minute read. I do have to get going, though. I have to pick up my little one from daycare. This has been a pleasure. Thank you for joining, for watching, for hanging out. I hope this has been valuable. I will be doing another one later this week, although I don't have a scheduled time for it. So if I didn't answer your question, jump on that one. Maybe I will be able to answer it. And I also do virtual sessions, and that's available if you go to my website, virtual session, you can sign up for one of those. Again, thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this community, and I'll see you guys in the next live Q&A.